There's a new video released this week that shows a Back to the Future look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal. You know, a glowing example of socialism where all the fossil fuels are gone and everyone lives in harmony. We'll take a look at that. Plus, the Mueller Report's out and some heads on the left are going to be exploding because it says, no collusion, no obstruction. We'll take a look at the reaction, plus a whole lot more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is the 13-Minute News Hour.
God bless the United States of America.
All right, let's take a look at this. Let's start off, we've got the Mueller Report, but let's start off with this video on the Green New Deal, okay? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her team's been working on this, and they put it out this week, and she introduced it like this. Climate change is here, plus we've got a deadline, 12 years left to cut emissions in half. A Green New Deal is our plan for the world and for a future worth fighting for. How do we get here? What is at stake? And where are we going? Please watch and share widely. All right, so she made this video. And what it is, again, it's a Back to the Future look, somewhere maybe in 2030. And she's looking back into, 2019 when times were so different. And she's, struggling to get this message out. And here's how it starts.
I think there was something similar with the Green New Deal. We knew that we needed to save the planet and that we had all the technology to do it. But people were scared. They said it was too big, too fast, not practical. I think that's because they just couldn't picture it yet.
All right, people are afraid because they couldn't picture it yet? No, people are afraid because they can picture it. They know what it looks like when socialism takes over. We have examples that span the century. They can picture it, and they are afraid. So from there, she goes and talks about the evil fossil fuel companies, how they are just spreading greed and corruption, and of course, the natural disasters that everyone, all of us, have to pick up the tab for. Take a look.
We lost a generation of time we'll never get back. Entire species will never get back. Natural wonders gone forever. And in 2017, Hurricane Maria destroyed the place where my family was from, Puerto Rico. It was like a climate bomb.
What is she even talking about? Now every hurricane is going to be an example of climate change or global warming? Oh, wait, hold on, sorry. They don't say global warming anymore because they moved it to climate change. That way they can cover hot, cold, rain, snow, drought, floods, whatever they want. It's all in there. So then, she goes on and talks about after these disasters hit and everything that there's going to be a change. There needs to be a change. There has to be government takeover, basically. And here's how she describes it.
Only way to do it was to transform our economy, which we already knew was broken since the vast majority of wealth was going to just a small handful of people, and most folks were falling further and further behind. It was a true turning point.
First of all, we've talked about this before, and things like this are very misleading. Middle-class wages are actually going up. People are doing better, but that doesn't matter to the left. They don't care if the middle class is going up. They see that, so that's not going to be their argument. What they do is say, well, look at the rich guy. He's getting even richer, so you have to be angry about that. You have to be jealous about that, right? And that's how they build these constituencies, by pitting people against each other. They don't want to raise all boats. They want to control a certain group of people by making examples out of others. And it is just not right. And yet that's exactly what she does. And of course, later on in the video, she talks about all those things that she actually said was part of the working draft of her Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and, a decent wage and a decent job for everybody, and how they consider what they consider a decent job. I don't know. I mean, what happens with the people that need to be janitors and other things like this? Are those jobs not deemed worthy and, they're just eliminated? You have to be assigned a job by the government? It sounds very, very weird, very strange. And yet that's the latest pitch that they're doing to make this happy, artistic way of embracing socialism and government takeover for all. So, all right, we're going to move on to the Mueller report, but I forgot to do this actually at the beginning of the show. So I want to put up this chart really quick for you and show you this big graph. And what does that represent? That represents our views from last week, folks. And I want to thank you so much. Last week alone, we had over 500,000 views just last week. And that is from people viewing and coming back, regulars, subscribers, non-subscribers. Lots of interest in the show. But see these two parts? Take a look at this. 95.5% of the views and returning viewers are non-subscribers. And I used to be one of those too, where I'd watch videos but not subscribe to a channel. So if you could, just please hit the subscribe button, and that would help me out a lot. Okay, let's get into the Mueller report, because there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of great analysis out there, but I want to give you just a few of the talking points, a few of the tidbits, and get into the reaction. So let's actually dive into the report, and here are a few key excerpts that I want you to think about as we talk about it. And here's the first one, President's reaction. When Sessions told the president that a special counsel had been appointed, the president slumped back in his chair and said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm effed." The president became angry and lambasted the attorney general for his decision to recuse himself from the investigation, stating, "How could you let this happen, Jeff?" The president returned to the consequences of the appointment and said, "Everyone tells me if you get one of these independent counsels, it ruins your presidency. It takes years and years, and I won't be able to do anything. This is the worst thing that could ever happen to me." And I bring that one up because that talks about the politics of the situation. Okay, his reaction led to actions that we'll talk about, and it also led to the state of him believing, as many did, that it was a political endeavor. And so that is very key. Okay, here's another finding from the Mueller report. This is number 2, the no collusion finding. Although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. All right, there you have it. Plain and simple. There's the finding. No collusion. Okay? So his report is focused on two main things, collusion and obstruction. There's the collusion part. Now let's look at this section about obstruction. Because we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment, we did not draw ultimate conclusions about the president's conduct. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that would need to be resolved if we were making a traditional prosecutorial judgment. All right, and that is key. So what happened here is he basically punted on obstruction. All right, he said, here's what the president did, and he lays it out in the report, number of meetings, number of things to, misguide the press or lie to the press and things like that. But for obstruction, you have to have intent. And the key thing to remember as you watch other analysis is that the crime being stated or being investigated was collusion with Russia. That didn't happen, okay? So it's hard to obstruct an investigation about a crime if you believe, and it turns out rightly so, that there was no crime. It's not obstruction to tell your officials to, denounce this investigation. It's not a crime to get your staff to say things to the media that aren't true. It might be unsavory politics, and we could talk about that, but it's not obstruction. So what Mueller did is he couldn't prove intent. How can you prove intent by the president when the president thought he was innocent and it turns out there was no collusion? So you can't prove intent there. So what he did was he put enough of these examples together to punt it over to the attorney general, who looked at that and said, you can't prove intent. There was no actual crime, so there's no obstruction. That's the attorney general side. But now there's also the congressional side, which even Mueller mentioned that he basically punted so Congress can do its thing. And with the Democrats running the House, Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have already announced they're on board with looking at impeachment. So that's where these things that aren't obstruction but might be unsavory politics it's just gonna continue. And this is where, at the beginning, why I mentioned this, why Trump was so deflated, so frustrated when this was announced, because it's all political. There was no collusion. The original investigation was based on a phony document, and everybody knew it. But we've had this years of investigation, and now we're going to have more investigation with the Democrats running the House and looking at this, possible impeachment charges. So let's look at some of the reaction. It's just classic. Here is one from Brian Williams.
I think a conservative reading of what we just witnessed is at the age of 68. Bill Barr has decided his legacy, he is fine with his legacy being the AG who took one for the team.
All right, so he says, take one for the team. That's the Attorney General William Barr's job. Mueller punted over to him. It's his job to talk about obstruction, and he did it. And here's CNN's take.
It's still very damning. I mean,
absolutely.
And politically embarrassing for the president.
And shameful.
And unethical.
But they have no shame in their game.
Yeah.
All right, and in that one, they actually bring up a key point. It is politically embarrassing, and that's why Trump had his staff and had his, relatives say things to the media to minimize the political damage. Not criminal damage, because there was no collusion, but to minimize political damage that he knew was going to happen. The media was going to have a field day with this. And so CNN, they were absolutely right. And that explains the president's actions. And the reaction was it's just so intense from the left, because they wanted this to be true so much. They wanted the collusion to be true. And so now they are left with, oh my gosh, I guess we'll have to attack it politically. And so that's why you're going to see the analysis. You're going to see continued media reaction like we've seen from MSNBC and CNN. And it just leads to make you wonder what's going on with the media. And here's where I wanted to dive in. I hope we don't run too late, but a little bit of what's going on with the media. Here is a so-called journalist, all right, Talia Lavin, who used to actually be a fact checker for the New Yorker, all right? And she's gotten in hot water this week, and it just shows the state of journalism in today's America, okay? She took on Ben Shapiro for a comment that he made about the Notre Dame fire at the cathedral. He described it as a shining monument, and here's actually what Shapiro said. He said, absolutely heartbreaking, a magnificent monument to Western civilization collapsing. All right, well, apparently that was a triggering statement for Lavin, because she wrote this, which is just in her Washington Post article. It's just amazing what she took out of Shapiro's comment. Fast-talking right-wing pundit Ben Shapiro called Notre Dame a monument to Western civilization and Judeo-Christian heritage. Given the already raging rumors about potential Muslim involvement, these tweets evoke the specter of a war between Islam and the West that is already part of numerous far-right narratives. It is also a central thread in the manifesto of Brenton Tarrant, the alleged Christchurch, New Zealand shooter. All right, so she's blasting him for saying that the cathedral was a shining monument. And again, this is supposed to be a journalist. This was someone who was a fact checker. So she's going to be teaching a class, and the class is called Reporting on the Far Right. This is out of New York University. So it made me wonder, what are they teaching at New York University? If there's a reporting on the far right, surely there's a class on reporting on the far left, right? So take a look at this. Here are some of the classes being offered under journalism at New York University. We have reporting on the far right. We have covering activism in politics, opinion and advocacy video, investigating injustice, covering the earth, New Yorkers at work, writing social justice, women in the media, minorities in the media, writing about immigration, investigating racial justice. There's nothing that even remotely hints at being fair and balanced in their teaching of journalism. They're not making journalists here, they're making advocates and activists for the left. And it's just bizarre, but I wanted to point that out to you, that these are actual classes being offered this fall, 2019, at New York University. All right, folks, we ran over today, but we had a lot to cover, and I hope you enjoy the weekend. I hope you have a happy and holy Easter, and we'll see you again on Monday. I'm Bobby Eberly. This is a 13-Minute News Hour.